American Constitutional Republic, affairs of state in Oklahoma, the beliefs, principles, opinions, and views of people just like me. This is 3D Politics. Featuring curator and creator of SewerPolitics.org, David Van. And our constitutional expert for Constitutional Focus here on 3D Politics, David Oldham, founder and scholar at constitutionalgrounds.com. And of course me, your verbal Viking and your fine mood director and host of 3D Politics, Tommy McKay. Here we are again, 3D Politics, every week on Facebook Live. I want to appreciate both the Davids for showing up. Enough humanizing, because you guys have become too human in the past. And so we're just gonna cut it out. We got exciting news tonight at the bottom of the hour. Scheduled to appear is Christian Bengel to have a constitutional focused discussion with David Oldham to find out exactly how things are going to work. We're going to try to work on our audio. Did I fix that for you?
It was me.
Oh, okay. Very good. We're going to do I'm going to touch a little bit of a Facebook spat that I do. Not a Tommy's Twitter tirade tonight, but a Facebook spat. We've got two stories coming up in the first half hour. Hoffmeister's replacements are growing. Ryan Walters is seeking the superintendent position, and also the McGirt ruling is now just a bigger mess than ever before. And, of course, at the bottom of the hour, Christian Bengel to discuss all sorts of things constitutional, and I've got that list right over there behind me. So, but let's start with, let me just share something real quickly. I've noticed that, what I think is one of the most important things is to go ahead and share our opinion with those people that are in our community, especially like Tulsa World, etc. And so let's see if I might have, okay, so here it is, a Tulsa, let me share this thing here. And here it is. Are we seeing that, guys?
Yeah.
Oh, it's time to embrace lawmakers who are willing to serve all the people, says Charles here in Oklahoma City. And so my comment was that claiming to serve all the people in general serves no one in particular. It's time to embrace lawmakers who are willing to serve as representatives of the state legislature rather than pretending to serve, quote unquote, all the people of Oklahoma. And then I go into the language of the 17th Amendment. Senators campaign as populists and are only loyal to the more extreme and often deep-pocketed elements of any political action committee PAC money, like James the Lankford, the Lanky Lank, the Lankster, the Lankinator.
Oldham, how do you grade him on his term paper?
It's really good. I would have had something else in there personally, but that's...
Well, it was a very quick response. I won't pay for their... Thank you. I appreciate that. I won't pay for their editorial or their opinions, but I can typically make comments on whatever the headline is, and so I was able to read that article, and a lot of that verbiage came directly from his arguments against, and so
awesome.
I was yes, sir.
Their arguments, that's like the best.
Tom, I thought you communicated the principle that we've been talking about for 2 years very well, very succinctly. I was impressed with it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a populism thing. So I had another one here. Let's see if I can share it. Change over to that. Yeah, that's right. No, that's the other one. I might have lost it. No, I lost it, so I'm not going to worry about it. So we'll go to the other one that I don't share with you. This is from Gary Peer and Jinx, also from the Tulsa World Opinion, and his letter was headlined "Extremist Views." This is throwing some pretty big words around from Gary Peer and Jinx. Extremist views link GOP party chairman and challenger to Senator Langford. So Gary Peer talks about two Tulsa World stories painfully illustrate the real effects of Republican leadership. One story is Oklahoma needs political will to get child well-being out of the bottom 10. This is a story from editorial columnist Jenny Graham's piece. She reports on Oklahoma's national ranking on child well-being, and we're solidly embedded in the bottom half of the nation, says Gary Peer. And here is this article from Jenny Graham. What is the presumption she has? Oklahoma needs political will to get children. Why are they offering? Yes, Van. Oh, too loud.
Yeah, back it up a little bit.
So,
there you go.
Why are they using political will to get at the parents' children? You see, and this is all presumed a good idea by Gary Peer, because supposedly he wants Republican leadership. The second story he mentions is from reporter Blake Douglas. Senator Langford responds to unheard of lack of neutrality from state GOP chair. This was from the story we did from the rally, where Bennett was describing he has a personal opinion, but he does not suggest it as the leadership, staying as balanced and neutral as he can. But again, the second story Gary Peer likes is that Tulsa pastor Jackson Limeyer is trying to unseat James Langford, and somehow it's unheard of that the chairman would have an opinion. Now, my comment about that has to do, and I know, Van, you have more seasoned skill in representing groups. Well, in representing groups, you've been in leadership positions, and you do have to take up a more neutral position. You've taught me that. But what I find here interesting about Gary Peer from Jinx is that he claims he wants better leadership. Well, how can we get leadership from a guy who won't offer his opinion? So really, you don't really want leadership, because otherwise leadership would okay, I didn't hit with that one. Here's the thing. 3 different things that he says are extreme views. One, that the election was rigged. Does you guys think that's extreme? Do you think that's an extreme view?
Oh, yeah.
You are fake news.
Yeah, that's who thinks it's, obviously there's all kinds of questions about this election. I think they're legitimate, and I don't think they've actually been heard out. They've been dismissed on standing or technical grounds, but we've not really had a good hearing about it.
No,
they've been dismissed out of hand.
Yes, so to call him extremist, you haven't heard it. And Scripture says he's a fool who judges a matter before he hears it.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme. Foolish is one,
I know, the Bible.
Extreme, wise is the other. I would rather be, extreme on the other end.
So he calls President Trump, Donald Trump, a liar. He says Donald Trump's big lie that the election was rigged. He's calling that an extreme view held by Bennett and 75 million other people.
Yeah, but keep in mind, that's not why the right is mad at Langford. They're mad at him because he said he was going to do one thing, and then he did the opposite.
Okay, look.
And remember also that it's the wrong argument to make that it was rigged. It was illegal because they didn't follow the rules.
Right.
Constitutional.
Undeniable.
Yeah.
Because
didn't
that's all
follow
in
the
the public
Constitution. In several states, they violated the Constitution.
Correct. And so it doesn't matter the rigging. They violated the Constitution.
Now, this is the election was rigged is verbiage that Gary Peer is associating or attempting to associate with Bennett and Trump as being extremist views, you see.
Right.
And he's actually ultimately trying to attach it to Lawmeyer as being an extremist.
And more than that, they're attaching it to public health. I still haven't figured that.
It is Gary Peer who is using the pejorative word rigged, which is inaccurate. It wasn't quote unquote rigged. It was unconstitutional. Now, here's where he really makes a mistake, in my opinion. He says, too, the other extreme view is, the second one is, Langford is a coward for objecting to the Electoral College. That is not what the charge against Langford was, which David Oldham was trying to get to a second ago.
Yeah.
Charge didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with him saying he was going to represent us and then not representing us.
Right.
He changed his mind on what he said he was going to do.
Right. He lied. Langford just flat out lied. He said he'd do something, committed to a man of his word, and he wasn't a man of his word.
June 26th, General Flynn said it best. He says that Langford essentially froze on the battlefield out of fear. There was a big noise on January 6th, and Langford's knees shook, and he froze in fear. And so I thought that was a more a polite way to talk about it. But again, I think that here it is. This guy Gary Peer has no idea what he's talking about. But his third comment that is extremist. He says that Bennett and Lawmeyer and Trump hold us that Democrats are communists or socialists. Well,
No,
he said it, you know. So.
Boy, I don't know what's going on with the voice thing. 2 years ago, McClain took just the opposite position, and I didn't hear anybody criticizing McClain for endorsing Inhofe a good year and a half before his election.
Right.
Because as soon as McClain got elected state party chair, David McClain, he came to the Tulsa Republican Assembly, and he talked about what we got to do in 2020. We got to get Inhofe sent back to the U.S. Senate. Well, we hadn't even had a primary yet.
Right.
And he is already endorsing Inhofe. And I called him on it. And you know what? To David McClain's credit, he corrected himself. You're right. We have to have a fair and open primary. We can't put our thumb on the scale. That was what McClain said.
Well, and to John's credit, while John has a personal opinion, there is nothing that he has done that has used his position specifically his position to harm Langford. He's a popular guy in the state.
No, he has.
Oh,
Bennett's
he has?
not. Yeah, Bennett used the state party social media resources to promote the Lawmeyer events. Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
promoting the party. That's promoting the party.
No, it wasn't. It was
that's
promoting a campaign event for a specific candidate.
Right. We're gonna have to have a discussion about that about the rules and whether are there rules that address that specifically.
I mean, it needs to be fixed.
It's unheard of. No, it's not unheard of, because in the 2012 race, they were giving money to Romney when they weren't giving it to Ron Paul, and they were the only two left in the
in the mayor's
fundraisers.
In the mayor's race, I think it was 2014. What's his name? David Weston. He was raising money for Dewey Bartlett. Bill Christensen was in the race, as well as other Republicans. Yep. And now Weston fixed it, so to speak, by also doing. Listen to me. Listen to me. He fixed it for Bill Christensen, but he ignored the minority parties, the less well-financed one. So
fixed. He sponsored a super high dollar steak dinner and then offered a hot dog feed for Christensen and then ignored the third guy.
Exactly.
So it wasn't square.
Well,
in any way, shape, or form.
The important thing there is Weston essentially admitted he made a mistake, and he tried to, quote, fix it, but only for the other major candidates. Other candidates, he didn't. And this is the problem. We expect our state party chair to keep the whole process even and balanced and transparent. That's what we.
Half a century of Republican nice guys has gotten us losing every time. Tommy McKay, your Verbal Viking. Find me at verbalviking.com. Every week we are joined here with David Van and David Oldham. David Van from SoonerPolitics.org and David Oldham from ConstitutionalGrounds.com. At the bottom of the hour, we got Christian Bengel coming up. He's scheduled to come up at any moment at the bottom of the hour. David's got some sort of freaking stuff going on there. I think your phone is ringing.
Oh yeah.
So to finish off this letter, where
I don't even know where this is coming from.
Okay.
I think it was Tom.
I think it was. So to finish off this thing from Gary and Jinx, he says that it's an extreme view that the election was rigged, in his words. An extreme view that Lankford is somehow a coward, according to the people who object with Lankford for objecting. Anyway, and he says, perhaps Jesus' plea in Luke 23:34, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So, I mean, here this guy, he is actually asking for Republican Henry Bellman, the former governor of U.S. Senate, long gone, I underlined. So this guy is just dreaming of the good old days with the good old boys like Henry Bellman. And this is the future of the Democratic Party, the future of the Republican Party.
Yeah. Bellman was a liberal by today's conservative standards. He was pro-abortion.
I mean, I don't know how far back you could reach to pretend that you want a leader and say Henry Bellman. The children today, they don't even know the name Henry Bellman. They have no idea who that is. All right, let's move to Hoffmeister's replacements. Oklahoma, so this is coming from, what is this story from? David Van brought me this story.
Nondoc, my friend.
Nondoc, thank you.
Trey Savage. Yeah.
Oklahoma Secretary of Education Ryan Walders announced today that he's running for state superintendent of public instruction in 2022 election. I'm thrilled, he said, to announce my campaign for Oklahoma superintendent of public instructions. In 2019, Walters became the executive director of Oklahoma Achieves, an education advocacy organization. And it's run by the State Chamber of Oklahoma. In 2020, they took that big racket and rolled it into another cabal called Oklahoma Achieves. It was absorbed into a new organization like every other racket they do called Every Kid Counts Oklahoma, with Walters serving as the CEO. That's what you call white privilege, kids. So tell us about the story, Van.
Well, yeah, and obviously, the chamber has done some things that in their mind were to better our education system. They feel like it's important to our workplace and stuff. Yeah, I've had problems with the chamber, some of their ulterior motives, because we're not slaves of the workers, the big employers in the state. And sometimes I feel like that's how the chamber treats us. But given that, this is a guy that was handpicked by Governor Kevin Stitt, and he's really been promoting school choice. He's been sideways with the education establishment, which is good by my book, right? And so unlike Joy Hoffmeister, who was picked by the liberal education establishment and run as a Republican, we've got a guy who actually is picked by a conservative governor. And look, this guy still needs to be tested out. I understand that. But when you look at the other two Republicans so far announced in the race, a school superintendent from, I think, Shawnee, very liberal, who's gotten most of her money from fellow liberal school superintendents in this state. And then Cox, this guy who ran twice as a Democrat and now has found Ronald Reagan. And he's become a Republican. He's running again.
Well, Van, you're blowing up the mic now.
Okay.
Tell me about this John Cox guy. Didn't he run twice as a Democrat now?
Exactly. That's exactly.
Well, I mean, is that what we want?
He's switched parties.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about Cox. He runs 199 kids?
Yeah, it's a small school district. So
it's a small school district with one or two schools, 199 children total out of pegs. And he's, I mean, unless he's doing double duty as also the principal, it's kind of ridiculous. And it's, anyway, the whole thing is ridiculous that we've got, he's probably getting two paychecks, but
no, it's a pay package. I mean, this has all been vetted out in previous elections and stuff. I don't think there's anything to it there as far as anything. He's not making a lot of money.
Well, it's tiny is my point. It's a nothing. There's schools that are bigger than his district.
Well, of course.
And so there's that. But again, I'm going to say it's not about school choice. It's about giver choice. We're the givers. they're taking from us, so it's not exactly giving.
Right.
It's giver choice. That's what it's got to be. And if I choose not to, I get to choose not to. And we've got to start having that discussion. But I'm curious as to what they all say about that, and I know they're not going to have the right answer.
Well, let me give you just a little bit of a sense of balance here in that every school district has to have a superintendent. That's the way our system is set up. And if it doesn't warrant enough pay to hire someone separate, you find one of your principals and you have them do it. Now, the downside of that is you don't have the accountability. Who actually does the principal answer to? Should be the superintendent and then the school board, right? And so that is a problem. But again, when you got a small school district, it makes sense to me to have one of your principals double time it.
It's a small category of people who want to be state superintendent. It's going to be hard to find somebody. To me, I like fresh blood because I've seen everything drop into a hole. If you've been in the Senate for 50 years, you are by definition swamp. I'm sorry, Inhofe, it's time to go. Even if you make a right decision tomorrow, it's time, okay? 50 years. But it's going to be hard to find so I don't begrudge a guy from a small district. We need new ideas. It doesn't matter if he hasn't sailed a big ship yet. We need somebody who's got a new idea.
Well, here's what I want to get at. In this particular race, it isn't about the individuals. Everybody in this race is like a NASCAR driver with all the patches all over the uniform. They're owned by all those people that fund them. And that's all you have to do is it's called guardian.ok.gov. And you just do a simple search on the candidates, just type in the last name, and you'll see who's given money to them. That's who owns them. That's who owns the office.
Well, and remember, the office is unconstitutional. So we're talking about a fictitious thing in government that we're going to support.
Wait a minute. I got to push back on you. The Oklahoma Constitution specifically calls for a superintendent of public instruction. How do you call it unconstitutional?
When it is fine if it can be financed without taxation.
Well, yeah, that's it.
Otherwise, it is wholly illegal. And the way it's being run, it is illegal.
Yeah. Now, and to your point, David, when the state constitution says the government shall provide a common education, at that time, common education was up through 8th grade, and it was 4 months of the year from December through March.
Right.
Okay, so now we're talking about a monstrosity that's maybe 100 times the drain on our resources that it was.
If I may join the contrarians and say perhaps the meaning of the word of common education didn't mean to every commoner, it meant simple common instruction.
Right. It was called secondary education when you went to high school.
Okay, so
yes.
My point is not counseling and not Maslow's need.
Yes.
Food.
Okay, we're not supposed to feed children and call it education. All right. And we have an epidemic of sexual abuse of teachers against students going on. People don't seem to want to talk about it because you're against teachers, so you hate teachers. No, trying to protect the children. We got to get Lee Dundas on here to talk about that.
Providing education doesn't mean providing child care either. And so to give everybody just, epic, home-based, web, virtual academy, that's enough to suffice. In fact, I've talked to some school board members around the state, one fellow particularly in Mays County, or Mazie Shoto School District. I said, don't throw away that virtual program you guys designed for the COVID era. Hang on to it. Because look, if somebody acts up in school, you don't owe them the right to be on campus. Make that part of their basic fundamental core subjects by virtual academy. This is just some of the things we're wasting too much and coddling too many delinquents.
So let's move quickly and touch a little bit on this McGirt ruling before the bottom of the hour. Just get about 4 minutes. We can always, I'm sure McGirt's going to have legs, but FBI posted a quote story online Thursday, July 8th regarding the growing caseload within Oklahoma City. McGirt versus Oklahoma ruling 9th, 2020. So this thing is blowing up in our face. Is that right, Van and Oldham?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Oldham. I've been cutting you off here.
No. Go ahead.
I can see if they're going to change the McGirt ruling. I get it, but to go retroactive, that created, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, 90% of the problems. They could have moved forward without jacking everything up as much as they did. When they went retroactive, that threw a corkscrew. No,
well, that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the law, Tom. The thing is, if they never had jurisdiction, then it has to be retroactive. Because they never had the jurisdiction. That's the point. So
go ahead.
It's just the thing is they don't have jurisdiction. That means they never had it. If they never had it, that means everything they ever did
is so according to legal logic, it has to be retroactive.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But I doesn't mean I'm not correct in my suggestion that by making it retroactive according to the logic of the law, that's where the problems come in mostly. Am I right?
No.
No, it goes forward. Okay.
Oh yeah, it goes forward as well.
That's 2 out of 3 so far.
There's both are weighing heavily right at the moment, and it was a tidal wave, so they haven't been able to deal with the initial wave, but they are still going to ever be growing because of supposedly having to deal with those things that should have been taken care of by the state.
So isn't this just simply a push? I've got Christian Bengel in the waiting room at the bottom of the hour. We're going to reset. Yeah, man, what do you got?
Just to follow up on this. Tomorrow night at the Cox Business Center, downtown Tulsa, there's going to be a forum. Steve Kunzweiler's part of it, Sheriff Regalado. And let me tell you, the tribal chiefs are furious about it because they're just assuming that this is going to be anti-tribe.
Chief Wiskin of the Cherokee tribe continues to call it anti-McGirt rally.
Yes.
It's forum. Okay. It's a forum.
Yeah, I'm telling people, if you can make it to downtown Tulsa Tuesday night to the Cox Business Center there at the Civic Center near the BOK, be there. This will be education.
What time was that, David?
Good point. I'm looking at it, Tulsa World article, but I guess, I'd be there by 6 if I were you. And it doesn't really say exactly when, but 6 p.m. So be there by 6.
Be there before that.
Yeah.
The McGirt decision essentially is a push to nationalism. They want this state to start out as the first nationalized state.
Yeah. Now, here's how this is setting up. State leaders and law enforcement are saying this is an attack on Oklahoma's sovereignty, or ability to govern within its state.
Yeah,
it's been undermined.
Sovereignty. We'll hear sovereignty a lot tomorrow night. They don't have sovereignty, but that's what they're going to say.
Well, yeah, but it's the point over who has jurisdiction. Who has the responsibility to maintain order?
But no, we know who has responsibility. The question is in what area.
Yeah, but the problem is this seems to be set up as either it's Indian territory or it's a state.
That's right.
That's what McGirt seems to be setting up.
That's correct.
And so they're basically saying the eastern half of the state sort of is a state, but it's not.
Well, you have to be able to tell what they are when you're dealing with them, because otherwise you're dealing with somebody you don't have jurisdiction over.
Oh, yeah, and the problem is if you got tribal plates and they're flag you for speeding, they're going to let you go. And that's ticking a lot of people off in Tulsa.
Well, it just shows a lot of cluster F among government where they continue to tell us to trust government with everything and trust what Dr. Fauci says, and Dr. Dart is going to do what Dr. Fauci says, and Mayor G.T. Bynum is going to do what Dr. Dart says, and we're all going to obey the national nucleados. So here we go. Make it dark, kids. We're bringing in Christian Bengel at the bottom of the hour. Here we go. It's 3D Politics, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, here we are again. Joining me always, David Van from SoonerPolitics.org and David Oldham from ConstitutionalGrounds.com. And of course, I am your fine host, political humorist, former mayoral candidate Tommy McKay, here joining us every week on Facebook Live. Tonight, we've got a special guest for a special constitutional focus discussion with Christian Bengel. We're going to bring him in just right now. Let's see if we can press the right buttons and get him in. Christian Bengel, we're bringing him in. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Nice job. He's got to connect to his audio. Just a matter of time before we can hear him. Looks like he's lounging about outside with a beautiful day. Christian Bengel, thanks for joining us here on 3D Politics.
Tommy, thanks for having me. I always appreciate coming here.
You bet. We're glad you could make it. Now, remind me again, you ran for city council, is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
And was it in Tulsa?
Yes, sir. District 6.
District 6. That was what I could remember. So former candidate for District 6 City Council Tulsa, Christian Bengel. You guys, that is Oldham and Christian, had a great discussion about the Massachusetts state arrest. The boys were carrying a lot of firearms through the state, and there was a lot of discussion about the one of the questions that Christian brought up on the discussion on the text last show, the propensity to find constitutional justification only from an offender standpoint. I thought it was a good thing we're going to talk about. And the scope of social norms, because we want to talk about whether views are extreme or not. Like Gary Peer from Jinx suggests, things are outside the scope of social norms. And then interstate travel with firearms and interstate travel at all. And then let's just start with the great question that Christian Bengel had last time. Without the facts afterwards, considering this Massachusetts arrest, who would you folks hold responsible for the failure of police to interact had their intentions been intended on mass violence? Why don't you set that up for me, Christian, for your question?
So David and I have had had several great discussions over, today's socioeconomic climate versus that of the time that our Constitution was written. We talked about specifically about properties and things of that nature and the social norms that were associated to the times then versus now. Okay. What we expect of each other as citizens in protecting each other's rights, but also that we have a responsibility to each other that we can expect no one to act with nefarious intent against our own constitutional rights. I think David and I have the same intent that we should have our constitutional rights, but I think philosophically we're disconnected in who should bear the responsibility for the enforcement of those constitutional rights.
Hey, Chris, let's
yes,
clarify. You're referring to David Oldham. There's two Davids here, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, man.
You're talking about
I
me.
apologize, man.
That's fine.
I apologize.
I knew I was in the clear. So anyway, nice point. Yes, so we call them Van and Oldham around here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Oldham and I had this discussion, and we kind of agreed where we should be constitutionally. Unfortunately, where we have the disconnect is the philosophy of responsibility, both in our policing and within our society as a whole. So that's really, I think, where David and I have a disconnect as far as who is actually responsible.
Okay, let me backfill a little bit for somebody who's just tuning in right now. This discussion of all this weeds revolved around the Massachusetts police arresting some guys who were practicing some paramilitary style activity and traveling, interstate travel. And so, Oldham, what do you want to talk about interstate travel of carrying the firearms in this Massachusetts arrest?
Well, just to reset the stage, remember they were gassing up a vehicle on the side of the road, and according to their word is that they carry gas with them so that they don't go into town because they know that they look strange because they wear body armor and they carry guns when they exit the vehicles, kind of military style. They exit and they set up a perimeter.
They're playing army.
They are playing army, and they were headed to maneuvers or to training camp in Maine. Okay, that's what they were doing. So they're out for their army weekend, and let's be quite honest. The group that they are affiliated with, and I think it's loosely, but they're coordinated groups as well. They are what most people would think they're wacko. They're out there. And
that's against the law, you know.
They believe,
from Jinx would call them extremists.
They would be extremists. They believe that they are the sovereigns. The Moors are the sovereigns over all of Canada, of North America, Canada and the United States. All of it, that's theirs. Not ours, theirs. And so that they don't have to abide by our laws necessarily. They don't agree with the laws about licensing, right or wrong. I actually agree they're right for the wrong reasons.
But that's all a red herring to this police action, though,
but the thing is that the police came up to offer assistance. He actually stopped to say, "Hey, it looks like you guys are broken down. What's up?" And then as soon as he saw the body armor and the guns, he started demanding gun licenses and everything else. And when you look at the charges, they were charged with gun crimes, possessing illegal guns, illegal magazines, wearing body armor in the commission of the crime, which was possessing the guns that Pennsylvania doesn't like. And so and then on, and not giving their name or not giving a proper name when required, but that requirement was based on an unconstitutional order. So with all that said, that's the backdrop for Christians in my conversation. Now, I have just added a lot of my own conclusions about where things stand, and so I apologize because I didn't just give a straight-up news report. But
we're having a discussion. That's fine.
That's the gist of what's going on.
So,
stopped to gas up the vehicle. Everybody agrees with that. The cop came up to offer assistance. Everybody agrees to that. He then demanded licenses. Everybody agrees to that. They ran off into the woods and stayed off in the woods for about 8-10 hours or longer. Everybody agrees to that.
That's against the law.
To be kind to our guest, I think the story that Oldham just described of the way of the bullet points has to do with the idea of the propensity of this show and us, I think, to find constitutional justification only from an offender standpoint. This is part of Christians' concept that why is it that we always justify the offender? So hit that part of it, Christian.
So, kind of to allude to what David spoke to just a minute ago. Yeah, sorry. I'll say that.
So easy on him.
How we do.
I love the comedy relief, man. Anyway, the issue here, as I see it, is one of the points that we talk about is basically making our officers who are enforcing the state statutes the villains here, right? And that's not the issue so much for me, in that what we're doing when we do these types of things, when we're demanding that our officers, quote unquote, put their own constitutional or create their own constitutional conscience, right, based upon what they've been sworn to uphold, right, to protect the public and to uphold the laws of that state, right? The problem, as I see it, is when we do that and we put them on the hot seat for these sorts of things, for the laws that they're enforcing, we're indirectly creating another layer of government, number one. And then number two, we're removing our own responsibility for electing the officers, or excuse me, the legislators who pass these laws, number one. And number two, for electing the judges who uphold these laws, right? So we have multiple layers of responsibility, ourselves, the legislators, and the judges. So if here in Oklahoma, being quote unquote the reddest state, why haven't we reversed some of these laws that are so unconstitutional?
We have, right? Haven't we, though? I mean, didn't we just pass permitless carry?
That's correct. But if we're calling certain crimes victimless, like one of the issues that we talked about was like speeding tickets, right? If we're calling that a victimless crime, why do we have those laws still on the books, right?
That's a good question.
Because just like David said, it's almost a scheme, right? Because that's Oldham's term.
Word.
The word scheme.
Yeah.
I'm putting you in context, my friend.
You're good.
So the term scheme, he talked about going down. And was it Sapulpa or Sand Springs?
I was in Sapulpa for my incident, but it was Adair where they were stopping people lately, and there's a lot of speed traps in. Right,
but you were talking about where the DA was the one actually making the deals, and people basically acquiesced their fines over to the government, right?
Correct.
And it was basically a money making scheme. So the issue for me is that, to me, again, we're trying to indirectly hold our officers accountable, which you guys always know, being an ex-law enforcement guy, I'm always going to defend our law enforcement officers because we put a lot up on them. And to me, to put that on them is unfair of us.
Tell us a little bit, because I've got a couple of points I want to press you on, but tell us a little bit about your law enforcement experience, because that plays a part in your observation of reality here.
So when I worked for the city back in the mid-'90s, after I got out of the military, I learned about a program from, I'm sure you all have heard the name Mark Stevens before, right, here in this community. Mark Stevens was famous. He was always on TV for Tulsa County. Okay. But Mark told me about a program that they had, the Reserve Sheriff's Deputy program here in Tulsa County. Now, they don't do recruiting or anything of that nature. I just went in and filled out an application. I started in the academy in 1999, graduated about mid-year, and then retired in May of 2016. Okay. So about 17 years that I've had, out there working with the sheriff's office and Tulsa police and the area agencies in doing law enforcement.
As a reserve, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, yeah. I do not want to make any claims that I did it full time. I did it as a reserve.
Oh, that's fine.
And Chris, I do want to say, I think your point is very important here, that, you're showing empathy for the officer, and there should be, because I think some of the constraints are put on, not just by our municipalities, but also our legislature. I think those legislators should do some ride-alongs and understand what kind of pressures they put law enforcement in. But at the same time, included in just about every oath of office is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
But where do we start that? But who do we hold the most accountable? The elected guy. Now, this is where what's important to me. The elected guy, the guy we put in office, right, to pass these laws and determine the constitutionality of law, or the guy you and I haven't vetted personally, right, with a vote, that the guy we haven't vetted, or the guy we have vetted with our vote, right, or the judges that we appoint. Those to me are, again, like I said, the 3 layers of responsibility before we ever get to the officer on the street.
Well, and there's where the disagreement comes. 2 points. First off, we have, and certainly I have, gone after every single department of government. These guys can tell you I've gone after every single branch, and I'm working right now at going after every single branch. I mean, physically going after
underneath branch.
That's number one. Number two is the responsibility for upholding the Constitution is on the oath taker. It is not, you can't plead ignorance because somebody else said different and we elected them. It's up to each of us individually to uphold the law, and the law should be objective and not open to this subjective opinion thing, which is where everybody wants to take it.
So you guys are listening to the brilliance of David Oldham debating the discussion of the constitutionality of issues with Christian Bengel here on 3D Politics. Joining us as usual is David Van from Sooner Politics. And I want to say on that point that Van was making, it is like a court of law where the burden of the proof is on the state. And so, I mean, we do the empathy and the sympathy should be on the officers because they have a higher level of service than your regular guy that's walking down the street. They have to act better, be better, and also assume that burden of proof. And just because they're assuming the burden of proof doesn't mean they're quote unquote villains. This is connotation of words here. So there's a just because they're villains doesn't mean, I mean, just because they have the burden of proof doesn't mean they're the villain. Just because we're pointing out they have a burden of proof. The other issue I have is with crime and traffic. The reality in my mind, the way I understand crime, in fact, it's proved out by the fact that they have an entirely different court for traffic because traffic doesn't fall into criminal court. And it's not crime, and it's literally a traffic violation. It's a victimless crime, in the idea that it's a victimless offense of an ordinance. There's no one is harmed.
Well, I don't think Christian will agree with that.
No, I'm not. No, and that's kind of where I think we're having some disconnect in our language with each other, David, is I'm not disagreeing that it isn't specifically a victimless crime. I think the problem is that because, again, the use of the word scheme implies that somehow the officers are in cahoots with the cities or the entities that they're that they represent.
Connotation.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
sometimes
the
they are
behind it, and that's where, again, like I said, we're trying to absolve multiple layers before we ever get to the officer, and that's where I have the issue with specifically.
Okay. And I don't absolve anybody in this process.
Okay, Van.
Chris, I want to say something. I know, I train law enforcement on CIT training, and I have empathy for my fellow officers. And I'm not just trying to bash them. I'm actually trying to help them. And I know you guys are a lot tougher on yourselves back in the, what we call the precinct house, than sometimes you let on. Things go bad and you have your public position on things. But when things go wrong, you guys beat up on yourselves pretty bad. So I know that.
Right.
Now, there's been times, I'm sure in your many years, where you saw what to the letter of the law was an infraction. You chose not to enforce it because you didn't feel in your heart that the intent was criminal. Am I right?
I agree.
And so you do show some discretion there. and yet you're saying an officer can't. Could you further elaborate where you have
I wouldn't
latitude?
say. No, Van, I wouldn't say that an officer doesn't have that latitude of discretion, because they obviously do, right?
Yeah.
The problem for me, though, is that sometimes we attempt to sterilize the acts that are associated to police interaction, right? A lot of times, and I say this all the time, 99.99% of where an incident or engagement goes with an officer depends upon the individual that they're interacting with, right? We can. That's debatable to some people, but to me, it's not.
Well, you have to add the same room for variation on per officer also, because
Correct.
it's not
That's
just
what I'm saying.
officers don't operate monolithically, and they're not all the same. So it
Always
has to do with chemistry.
Yep.
Sometimes you get along with some people, sometimes you don't. I think that happens in the
Right.
traffic stop too.
Yeah.
Right.
Tom, you don't have big enough bazooms to be able to get out of it.
Well, you've never seen my bazooms. Here's a problem I got. I want to ask you this as a law enforcement guy, because Chief Franklin here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was talking about this horrible stop with the two officers that were gunned down. And one of the big points they were making was, we told him 41 times to get out of the car, like he's a bad guy. Because what they should have said, my comment was, if I tell my children 41 times to do something they haven't done, I'm a bad parent. Okay, this has nothing to do with the guy in the car. What is going wrong with the training of officers where they think they're just going to, why don't they just, I don't want to get too
Well, that when you're talking about, Tom, they were trying to illegally take the car.
Well, that's not my question specifically. What I'm asking is, what makes an officer think after 41 times that 51 times the guy's going to go, you know what, maybe I'll come out of the car. I mean, hell, after 41 times, where's the backup? Where's the backup?
But Tommy, that's the problem here, is that as a society, we're hypersensitive to police behavior now. So officers are making extreme efforts not to carry things to the next level because of the scrutiny of the public, right?
Except that particular incident was caused by the police.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking in general. I would say though that the what did you? I just lost my point.
It's avoidance. It's avoidance of going to the next level.
Christian,
The thing is that I wouldn't be having a disagreement if the police were acting lawfully from the get-go. But there was near nothing lawful other than the pulling the guy over for making a wide left-hand turn. There was almost nothing lawful that the police did on that stop.
Can you
We're talking about the David.
We're off in the weeds.
So the thing is that this is the point. We have bad guys on both sides, and we're trying to unscramble this egg as though there's something good here we can take away from it. There's not. There's good lessons about how not to do things, and we need to learn that. That's what I'm saying. I
want to save a few minutes for Christian to get out of here safely, but I will say I think one of the problems is on both sides of this issue is we pretend that the police live in one community and then there's the regular people in the other. Police come from. We are all in this. We're all so the police aren't special, and the people they pull over aren't special, and every time a policeman pulls somebody over, they do not risk their lives. That's just not true. That's a hypersensitivity on the police side. When you pull me over, you're not risking your life. And when you pull my wife over and these two guys, and when they pull you over and everybody else we know. So it's only rarely that they get into a life-threatening situation. It's not a life-threatening situation on every single stop. That's just hypersensitivity creating more problems between cops and police. Okay, I'm a normal guy. I'm not threatening a cop's life when I get pulled up.
I want to know what Christian thinks about that thought.
Yeah, Chris.
I think the context of the intent in that type of language isn't necessarily that just like Tommy said, that you're in danger every time. The thing is that when these officers engage under probable cause under the state laws, right? When they pull a person over, they have no clue who they're dealing with. They have no clue what that person's intents are. What their aggravation levels will be.
That's not true. That's not true. That is not true. Once they've pulled him over for whatever stop, they've got the license plate. They've already got the VIN. They know who's supposed to own it. They know everything up one side and down the other. They have a hell of a lot more to go on than the driver of the car. The driver of the car has no idea who pulls them over, whether it's a real cop, or why they got pulled over. And then the cop says, "What are you so nervous for?" Well, I'll tell you why I'm nervous. Because you think I'm going to kill you every time you pull anybody over. You are paranoid, not me. Okay? You're freaked out. That's your problem, not me. I'm easy.
Whoa, Tom, go.
I think Tom got a little excited.
I'm saying it is bull crap when they push this stuff down our throats about every time a cop pulls somebody over, they're risking their lives. It's just damn not true. Yeah. That's like every year 0.0031 of a Tyrannosaurus Rex is born. It's just not factually true.
Right. Let me finish what I was saying, Tom.
Christian's thoughts on this, because this goes right along with like Stephen Mill's thought that if you are being a peace officer, if you're not engaging in what I would call the scheme, the extortion scheme to just rack up the ticket dollars, but you're really pulling people over who need pulling over for some reason, then you're on the moral high ground. But if you're pulling over everybody on the slimmest of margins, or even like in Adair making stuff up, according to the passenger's viewpoint, he was, they weren't in the wrong whatsoever. Then now you've got problems already out of the gate, and it's easy to boost it to the next thing. What do you think about that, Kristen?
Well, I think there's a law in the state constitution that says your city's income cannot be generated by 1/3 of by those types of penalties, right?
Yeah.
I may be incorrect, but I think that's right. Is that not right?
Yeah, you got
it can't constitute for more than 1/3 of your income.
Yeah, I don't know about the third, Mr. Bengel, but
we'll look it up.
I know that, for instance, Weber's Falls was actually ordered they could not do speed trap along I-40 because even though they had a little wedge of land that they incorporated, the Supreme Court said, you're really not addressing local public safety by that. You're just revenue.
Right.
And so they'll make judgments on that. Yes, revenuing by things like that, our Supreme Court will not support.
That's where David or Oldham's pretend offenses comes in, right? And that I agree with is we do have those communities, those smaller communities, what do set up those speed traps specifically for revenue generation, and they are quote unquote pretend offenses, right?
Yeah.
Because I used to live in the town. I don't even want to say the name because I don't want to offend anybody. But I lived in a smaller town outside of Tulsa that did exactly that same thing. They would create pretend offenses to pull people over, so that they could generate that revenue. I'm not discounting that stuff does occur. I'm not discounting that there are cops with a chip on their shoulder. I'm not discounting any of those things. But the point that I was making when Tommy went on his rant there for a little bit. The point that I was making is that yes, he is right that if the license plate is run, there is information the officer has before he goes up to the car. However, he doesn't know the individual specifically. He doesn't know what he's getting into. And again, this is where I have a little bit of disconnect because it's not that it is a little bit of an exaggeration that every stop you're risking your life because yes, it isn't every stop, but there are those incidences and we're asking them to take those risks for us every time. And to me, it's like I said, I think we're putting a little too much on the middleman between ourselves, our legislators, and our judicial system. And to me, we have to take some responsibility in the laws that our officers are enforcing.
Yeah, we got to get out of here. Christian, I really appreciate you striving to find areas where we agree. That was a great job, and I want to have you back so you can just light my fuse again, and we'll get out of here. Christian Bengel, thanks for being here, and we'll send you out. We're going to have you back again.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, it's been great, Chris. Great.
Thanks, David.
Yep.
Gentlemen, what do you think about that?
That was good. Every time I talk to Christian, I learn a little bit more about kind of the mindset, the law enforcer mindset. And
I love how he set me off. That was fantastic.
Let me say something.
It's cathartic, you know.
Let me say something about Chris.
Yeah.
Chris actually tonight showed a demeanor that I'd like to see more of in law enforcement. He doesn't get easily rattled. He does seem calm, irrational, and I wish every officer that I interacted with had his demeanor about things.
Yes. But this is something that we didn't bring out. We need to bring it back and talk about. And we were talking about how the difficulty in carrying out unconstitutional orders that are called for by the statutes, called for by management, the people he works for, supervisory personnel and so forth. And I've talked to numerous people about these kinds of things, sheriff's departments, police departments, and so forth. And they all say basically the same thing. Yeah. And that they struggle with it, but they go off of the statute, even though they know. I mean, they've got this gut feeling that they're doing something wrong, but they do it anyway. And I want to talk more about that. We didn't get to it tonight, but
no, we had plenty.
And Tom, you're really hot.
You are really hot. But Christian makes a very valid point, and that is, police officers are the customer facing, as it were.
Yes.
Service. The problem is they're not providing us a service when they're pulling us over to extort money from us or something like that. They're not performing a service. If we've truly done something wrong, then that's fine. But he's right. We've got to address the laws, and we've got to address the judiciary, because the judiciary is allowing all of this junk to happen. The judiciary, and they are less, they are more responsible because they have actually gone to school, gotten a Juris Doctorate degree. They have studied the law supposedly ad infinitum, which is not true, but they have studied the law for years beyond what the police have. And they are the promoters of this stuff and pushing the police to do these things through their court decisions. So he's absolutely right. There's this, and the police are between a rock and a hard place. They're between the Constitution and all of the criminal activity from government, putting all this pressure on them.
One of the problems comes in when they forget that they're doing a civil service, not providing a caped hero. Okay, this is one of the big problems. And so where I understand that the empathy that we want to give to our police officers in their industry, they do suffer meeting the worst of us more often than others. And the same thing is true of other industries. If you're in the food business, you meet picky eaters. If you're in the jewelry industry, you find out what people care about on their ring and that they need it sized twice a year because of the weather. And there's different things that you learn from each industry, and we should all have empathy for each other's industry. I don't know how oral hygienists do it. I don't know. I could barely wash your hair, much less dig it around in your mouth. I don't know. We should have empathy for everyone. But when you take a civil servant and you try to put a cape on him and pretend that he's in danger every time, then that makes me feel like I'm a bad guy, because all
Well,
we're doing is driving down the road. And one more statement, notice how easy when we're sensitive. I know I talk about jewelry customers and kitchen from the kitchen about customers. From the cop's perspective, it's so easy to conflate traffic violation with crime. Well, it's not a crime, okay? It's simply not.
The thing is, and this is the problem. Like when we get, I talked with Christian about a traffic stop that I was involved in. I was pulled over because I wasn't doing 45 in a 45 that shouldn't be a 45. It's a 55 at minimum. Just, it's out in Sapulpa. It's out where it opens up, and there's in
117, right?
What?
121st Street.
Out near the golf course and the Walmart.
What's it?
Yes.
Up from downtown out toward the Walmart and around the golf course, and it's wide. I mean, and it's 45, and it's marked 45, and they were in there. Well, I get to court, and this C8 or OHP was sitting there just pulling over cars right after one after the other. Tell me it's not about revenue generation. You know,
right.
Oh, no. I'm going to justify it because I have to teach people the law. Because that's what they do. They justify it. I got to teach you the law, and I'm going to teach you that by forcing you into court. And even though you're going to get off with near nothing in the way of fines, I mean, it's $35. But before you get out of there, it's $200 because of all the other taxes that you got to pay to get out of there. But then it's the extortion of your insurance company on the backside, and it's the unwritten, the unseen things that come out of it. Yes. But it's all to teach you the law, to force you to do your 45, even though 55 is really safe.
And you think about, for instance, the requirement that you have proof of insurance in your vehicle. Well, first of all, those are my private papers. They should need a search warrant in order to get that from me.
Correct.
And why is that even there? Because they have to prove that I actually have insurance on my vehicle. Why? Where is the victim on that? Well, in case you get in an accident, then, you got to be able to pay for it. Okay,
really?
Now that's a civil law thing.
But here's the thing, David. And this goes to the way you have to think about things from a free agent perspective, a freedom perspective.
Yeah.
The government cannot impose upon free people those things which we have a right to not abide by. In other words,
you didn't have to have insurance on your horse and buggy.
And you don't have to have insurance on your car.
Yeah.
If I put myself out on the street, I am taking responsibility for the dangers of everybody else driving. So when we change our thinking just slightly, all of a sudden it realizes I have to put the insurance on myself in the odd case that somebody careens out of control and hits me. It's on me.
Oh, you have an action of law against them if they willfully harm you.
Only because that's the way we think. But here's the point. No.
I think that is killing me.
No, because that's all in the perspective, and that's how we get to these bad places. The thing is, I put myself out there. It's the same thing. And
wait a minute.
Okay.
If I take a baseball bat to your knees, you can't sue me for your medical bills.
That is a criminal action, not a tortious action.
But are you saying you have no civil recourse?
What I'm saying is that a criminal act, a decidedly criminal act, is different than a tortious act.
Okay, but now you've also said that the proper regulation is things like drive on the right side of the road, right?
Correct.
So if somebody swerves over the line and hits you, they have broken the law.
Well, no. The crime comes in on bodily injury, not crossing.
No. It comes in on intent. on intent.
Oh, okay.
What I do is I would insure myself in case something bad happened to me.
Right.
Otherwise, I don't put myself into danger. And this was exactly what I learned on the soccer field, because before I could play soccer on any field that I play, organized sports, I have to sign a waiver that I hold everybody else harmless except for criminal activity.
Right. Yeah.
So and it's the same thing, it's just done by overt action rather than signing a waiver. When I put myself out on the side of the road, I know a car could come across the thing and hit me, just because that's what happens in life. I mean, accidents happen.
Yeah, but if he showed negligent disregard,
criminally, that may be a different thing.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. If he's busy texting and doesn't realize the road curved, and now he's over in the opposite lane, that's crime.
Whose body is still going to pay for that? And your insurance company doesn't necessarily have to pay for that, because you aren't abiding by the contract of the insurance. The insurance company can be absolved, because the insurance company should not be held liable for your criminal and overt acts.
Well, I got that.
We're so far deep, it would have to be a case that we would be studying this particular case. We can't. All we're doing is spinning around on what would happen.
Right. Again, the point I was trying to make here has to do with insurance. It's such a long trail of justification that by the government of government convenience, they're making you show your private papers to them in order for you not to be ticketed.
Well, it's more than that, David. They're forcing you to have
I get that. Okay.
Insurance policy.
Hold on, I'm going to stop you here because you keep hijacking my point here. I'm going somewhere with this. Okay. And why do you even have to have those papers? Because you have to have insurance, they say, in order to drive your car. Don't need it to ride a horse or a bicycle, but they have selectively decided that you have a right to ride a bicycle, you have a privilege to drive a car. This is all some construct of their own fantasy.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, absolutely. This is where I've been trying to go here.
You actually agree.
Right. And then the insurance is only if you are deemed to be, by courts of law, to be responsible for damages done to somebody else. Not the state, but to somebody else.
Correct.
And now it could be you took out a road sign and the state could sue you to replace the road sign. But, again, that's not acting in the criminal capacity. They're just enforcing it. And you were right. It's because the insurance lobby has been that powerful.
Yeah, because that's why the insurance companies are some of the biggest financiers in the entire world. Why? Because they can extort from us, and they get all this money. They make all this money. Yes, they pay out a lot, but they've made so much more because we've been forced to pay into it as a tax.
There you go, David. We are paying mandatory insurance in order to live freely and move about freely and conveniently to people who are using that money, then some of it, to turn around and further take away our liberties. We're paying for the destruction of our own liberties.
We're not moving around freely because you don't move freely. You have to pay first.
No, but the point is, we since Benjamin Franklin and the creation of the Republic, we've been paying for the destruction of the Republic. I mean, essentially, that's been
and by a fascist system, and that it is economic fascism, because the insurance companies, even though they're government regulated, they are private industry.
Well,
If
let's
we're
understand
mandated,
to
we
the
have to.
people listening, fascistic, it relies on the pretense and the fraud that is called co-ownership. They pretend that we co-own the PAC and co-own the zoo and co-own the Gilcrease Museum, and we pretend that we co-own these things, and then when the pandemic hits, you don't get to own anything because they co-own it away from you.
Well, that's in another context. I'm talking
But I'm saying the fascistic thing has to do with this concept of co-owning, and it's socialism in that form.
Yeah. In this sense, fascism can be more damaging to people than communism, because they will pass the buck and say, well, Facebook's private industry, we can't tell them what to do. Meanwhile, they've set up Facebook to do what the government couldn't do.
Fascists are communists that live in nicer homes. You know,
And I'm just saying, if you think that fascism isn't quite as bad as communism, I'm sorry, folks, but you're wrong.
No,
there's always socialism with fascism. There's always
it's the idea that we're in this together is total. I love how they think we're in this together with the pandemic, but somehow trickle down economics doesn't work. I thought we were in this together.
Yeah. Well, anyway, listen, Chris Bengel just really elevated the discourse, and I think we got somewhere. I thought he's a great guest. I look forward to talking to him.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I wish all law enforcement had his demeanor.
Well, and
I'm not talking about his views. I'm talking about his demeanor.
To get back to, I think, he's sensitive to the law enforcement issue, and I'm sensitive to the regular driver issue. And when it came down to the 41 times when they told this guy to get out of the car, this is one of the problems that I think that is huge in law enforcement, is that once they can see that this guy is not complying, their machoism kicks in, and they decide, we two guys are going to pull this guy out of the car. Whereas what they should have done, and I think it would be worth 1.5 lives if you want to call it that way. One guy was shot and injured for life. The other guy's dead. You know what they could have done instead of trying the force routine and 41 times of screaming at the child to clean their room? They could have just blocked it off. The guy couldn't have gone anywhere. They could have surrounded the car and waited till morning. They could have had a standoff. They could have waited all day long, or they could have called in the SWAT team. The idea that we're going to go in and do a police, this is the micro. What's true in the micro is true in the macro. You could go to Vietnam and either have that all-out war and overwhelming force, or you can go in and try to do a police action. Here's a deal where instead of doing a regular police action with overwhelming force, they try to just coerce the guy out of the car, which turned out to be literally deadly. Okay.
Right. And they could have put a boot on it. I think here, Tom, you're at a very important point. If they would have put a boot on it and would have required all this, it would have been subject to a lot more scrutiny by higher ups in the department. And what they were doing was hijacking the vehicle. They had no authority to confiscate the vehicle.
Correct.
Right. Well, and remember, this gets doubly complicated. First, they had no authority to confiscate the vehicle. Second, he was a felon in possession of a gun, which once they confiscated, they would do a search, which is why they wanted to confiscate it. But they as soon as they did the search, they would find the gun. He's back to prison, maybe forever. So the point is that this thing, this particular situation was perfectly solved by not getting into it. Nobody would have been harmed.
That's the point. I think I wish I could have driven home more with Chris. Is, you know what? You really don't have to push. You can pick your battles as a cop. You can say, you know what? There isn't an imminent threat to public safety.
Well, and I steered us off because I was trying to stay general and not get into the weeds of that.
And this is something, but this is something we need to talk about with other guests. And this is, once they give an order, by God, the law has to be upheld. And
it's their ego that they're upholding.
We're going to de-escalate by so escalating it that you should be so terrified that you just cower in fear. And that's what they call de-escalation. They're going to so escalate that that's going to de-escalate.
David, I congratulate you. That is the very foundational principle of my CIT training that I do with officers like Bengel, and is de-escalating a situation.
Right.
And especially when
proper definition of de-escalation.
And it applies so foundationally when you're dealing with people in mental illness, psychiatric duress. You want to de-escalate because you get more cooperation.
Yeah.
And they're so used to
turns away wrath, right?
Yeah. Again, this is why, guys, I've always said that our problem is not too much training, it's imbalanced training. When we constantly train them to assume everybody's an obstinate dude, then a cop's going to come into it with a chip on his shoulder, presuming you to be obstinate.
Well, remember also, it's like the ADARE thing.
Yeah.
If the guy had come up and said, well, okay, you're going to have a problem with it. If there's two of you, there's one of me, and I don't know if my thing's going to show it. Let me go check the tape of them going by and it flashing up saying it's over speed. If he didn't have that, you got two witnesses versus one witness in the cop, two witnesses in the car. He should have just let it go. But no, he had to throw the guy in the back of his car because he said, you're lying, we weren't going that fast. And then it's just escalate. And it's all for something that could have been just have a nice day, drive on.
The mentality of any rule enforcement even falls down into the security guard, where you and I were talking to the security guard, and it's like, okay, what is your name? You said. And he says, well, that doesn't matter. Okay, well, so this is one of the problems with law enforcement in general, and it comes down. So one of the things I'm offended by is these stupid little. I am not an animal that's conditioned and trained by slogans, NDUI and knock, stop the knock. And click it or ticket and all these other freaking conditioning things. I am not a dog, and I am not conditioned by your stupid bell. And so the problem with law enforcement attitude is that I need to be trained like a dog. And so this is when they pull us over, just like a seasoned law enforcement, they don't know what kind of dog they're dealing with, right? So because they're not really interested in finding out a human being, all they're doing is calculating danger with another dog that might bite them. And we've given them all the little conditioning clues, but all that is making me respect you less, treat me like a human being. But again, not all cops are the same. Not all people are the same. You mix two people together, sometimes it's fine. Two people together, sometimes they don't mix.
Yeah.
Anything else, gentlemen?
Oh, that's good.
Man, this is good. I thought this was fabulous. I knew this was going to be big. I think we have a lot more to discuss. I'm loving the direction that this is headed.
Excellent. When I saw him chime in with the discussion from last week's show on our text from 3D Politics on Facebook, I knew that was the kind of discussion and the depth we wanted to get into here on 3D Politics. So as typical, guys, we're going to set it up again and get out of here. 3D Politics, your home for everything you need to know with state and local and federal politics. David Van, SoonerPolitics.org. Every week, David Oldham, ConstitutionalGrounds.com, and Tommy McKay, your fine host with VerbalViking.com. We'll see you guys next week.
Good night, everybody.